For example, an investment of $10,000 in a company that makes nothing but cooling systems for data centers 3 years ago would be worth more than $170,000 today, and it never made a single chip. It's a company called VertIV, and all it did was sell the picks and shovels on which the whole AI build-out runs. That's how this game is often played. Well, in a gold rush, the surest money always goes to the quiet ones selling the equipment, not necessarily to the ones always swinging for the gold. And this very same thing is happening right now in memory, where AI is just gobbling up memory faster than the world can create it, and the memory it wants is HBM, or high bandwidth memory. That's because the chips immediately adjacent to every single AI processor have doubled in the last quarter. The makers are out of stock until next year. And that's why Micron is just crossing $1 trillion. But Micron is the clear choice, and the real value is in the supporting tools underneath it. As for the memory suppliers, they're going to get paid no matter which maker wins, and those are the names we're going to be tracking down in today's video. I will also ensure that at the very end, I cover 2 ETFs that best represent this area. So here's how I'm going to look at this memory stack framework. There are 5 layers, and each one is a choke point, a place where this whole thing just stops dead without it. At the very top of the pile is the interface, the chips that allow memory to actually run at AI speeds. Below that are the tools and machines that physically build the memory. Then there are the inspectors, the systems that catch a single flaw before it kills a chip. The testers, because you don't ship until every layer is proven. Over them and at the base are the bonders and the materials, the technology that joins the chips together and the raw ingredients and everything a fab consumes. And that's the entire stack. And I mapped out each layer of it to find the suppliers sitting on top. The winners are SK Hynix, Samsung, or Micron, whichever wins out. And most of them you've never even heard of, which is why you're going to want them on your watch list right now. This is a 5-year build, and we're still in the first few innings. So let's start at the top layer, which is the interface. And Rambus, with the ticker RMBS, totally owns that. 3 companies control 97% of a market that most investors have never even heard of, and Rambus is one of them. It doesn't make memories. It builds the registering clock driver, the chip that sits on a DDR5 module and keeps the data clean at the speeds AI needs. So the memory module not only does not run without it. On top of that, Rambus owns the basic memory patents. So the big manufacturers pay a royalty on the memory they sell too. Put those two together, and Rambus is paid twice on the same chip. To construct and license it, the royalty engine goes directly into the HBM4E controller for the next generation of memory. But there's an open antitrust inquiry to watch. But the model itself is so clean that its numbers do not even resemble those of a chip maker. Rambus revenue has roughly doubled in the past 4 years, but operating income has exploded by almost 800%, and the operating margin has jumped from 9% to 37%. That's a high margin floor with a growth engine strapped on top because those royalties are almost all margin. Every DDR5 module and every step to HBM4 still goes through Rambus, which collects on both. Of all the constraints, there is one precious metal in that supply chain that can cripple memory. That metal is gold. It is a very rare event to get the whole drop. And the last time miners were so severely beaten down, the sector more than tripled from its low. So management and insiders are sitting on approximately 30%. Institutions, 30% more, which means 60% is with the people who just happen to be closest to the story. That's real skin on the line, as drilling is going to start very shortly. And management is from companies that built billion-dollar mines, K92, BHP, and Ivanhoe. Today, the director of a Canadian goldfield is vice president at K92, one of the most successful junior-to-producer stories of the last 20 years. 2 high-grade zones are already confirmed at each end of Meminisca, with 12 kilometers of banded iron formation between the two that has never been systematically drilled. Their flagship Meminisca Gold Project is in northwestern Ontario, the gold country that's generated more wealth than the fabled Klondike. And that gap is the real story. One level down are the tools that build the memory physically. High bandwidth memory requires on the order of 3 times the equipment per gigabyte of regular memory. Applied Materials, ticker AMAT, has a significant role in almost every step of that equipment. The etching, depositing, and layering processes turn sand into a working chip, and these tools are built with the memory makers, who even run a joint research center with SK Hynix. And so it designs its machines in the next generation before anyone else gets a chance. And it just released the Sim3Z Magnum for etching the taller, denser stack that HBM needs. The company itself is a steady grower now, and that's fine, but the memory piece inside is totally on fire. High bandwidth memory revenue rose from nearly zero to $1.5 billion in a year, and management is aiming for $3 billion next. So you're buying a stable, cash-rich giant with a memory afterburner that's tripling all by itself. Lam Research is the purer memory bet, the inverse on the same rung. Physics are simple. When a memory stack grows in height, you can't build it without more of Lam's tools. Lam has the etching and deposition steps that carve out the deep vertical channels and fill them with copper, which is literally how you stack memory into a tall HBM chip. There's stuff like Sabre 3D and Syndion inside every big memory maker. Revenue at Lam fell during the last memory slump, but then rebounded to an all-time high as spending resumed, rising 24% in a year with net income up 40%. And of course, as memory starts to move, Lam isn't just a participant. It is harder than most because memory is the very place it is most vulnerable. And then, when we go to inspectors one rung lower, you hit the layer whose whole job is to catch defects before they ruin a chip. And that would be the inspectors. And the first ONT name is Onto Innovation, ticker ONTO. The old method creates up to 1,000 times more connections than embedding a bonding memory in a hybrid stack. One buried crack will scratch the whole part. So Onto built the high-speed imaging system that detects below-the-surface defects, and a major memory maker has picked its new Dragonfly G5 system to review next-gen HBM4. The whole company, Onto, makes about $1 billion a year, but one customer just signed it into a purchase agreement worth more than $240 million through 2027. That's almost a quarter of a year's revenue, committed years in advance by a single buyer and as close to guaranteed forward business as this industry can get. They make that commitment to you that far in advance because they can't build it without you. If the edge of Onto is spotting the defects hidden just beneath the surface, then KLA's is sheer scale. KLA is the closest thing this whole industry has to a monopoly, operating many times the size of its nearest competitor in finding nanoscale defects with flagship systems like its broadband plasma line that no one else even comes close to. And the job just keeps getting bigger because the more fancy these chips get, the more places a single flaw can hide. And KLA is the company the whole industry depends on for catching them. KLA's revenue is up 76% over the last 4 years. Its operating income is up 110%, and its operating margin increased to 43% from 36%. And there really is no number two. So when the entire industry needs more inspection, almost every dollar of that goes to one company. Now, before inspection finds every defect, finding them is not the same as proving the chip works, and that's the next level down, the testers. That layer is owned by a pair of companies, and you're starting with Teradyne, ticker symbol is TER. A stacked memory chip requires up to 10 times more testing than a regular one. And that's why Teradyne just released the Magnum 7H, specifically designed for high bandwidth memory. But I want to be precise because Teradyne has a little twist. At the corporate level, total revenue has actually declined about 14% over 4 years as its oldest test lines begin to cool off. But under that flat surface, the memory engine is in full control. DRAM test revenue went from $80 million to $350 million, an increase of over 330%. And AI work has already passed 60% of the business and is moving towards 70%. As memory technology advances, the successful part of Teradyne is experiencing significant growth. Now, the other half of that rung is the global Advantest ticker symbol, which is ATEYY, which by most estimates holds about 2/3 of the entire chip testing market. The neat thing is, the same family of testers can test both the AI processor and the high-bandwidth memory all stacked around it with platforms like its T583 memory tester. So Advantest is really the toll booth for the whole testing layer. In its latest financial year, sales leapt almost 45%, but operating profit jumped almost 120%. Because when you are the standard every chipmaker tests against, the orders just keep coming. The one practical thing to note is that here in the States, it is traded OTC. So it's a little more flimsy to buy, but the business is at the heart of this whole story. Now we're going to go down to the foundation with 3 different names because the bottom layer does 2 different jobs: the merging of the chips, the raw materials that the fab eats in tons. And we'll begin with the fusing, where the leader is BESI, ticker symbol BESIY. To make HBM4 at all, hybrid bonding is becoming necessary because it welds memory dies together directly, copper to copper, rather than using the tiny solder bumps that chips use to rely on. And BESI just happens to be up front, making those bonding lines with applied materials and placing chips with an accuracy that almost no one else can hit. BESI's revenue grew a solid 28% last year, But its order book did something far more dramatic, with new orders more than doubling, up 104% year over year. That gap now, it's the signal because orders in this business are 1 to 2 years of revenue. The memory makers are currently placing hybrid bonding orders for production in 2027. Now this one comes with a caveat, and this is also an over-the-counter name here in the States, but BESI sits at the gate of how the next generation of memory physically gets built. Next up is the speculative one, Kulicke and Soffa ticker symbol KLIC, and I'm going to be upfront about why it's even on the list. Kulicke pioneered a cleaner way to weld stack chips together with heat and pressure rather than solder, and is pushing it towards the advanced stacking that HBM will eventually need with its Aptura platform and a next-generation process built with Rome. But these figures do cry out for honesty. 4 years ago, the company slashed revenue by over half, minus 57%, and the company is sitting right at about break-even today. The whole case is indeed forward-looking. Its advanced packaging line is just beginning to ramp, and its real HBM volume is a 2027 story, with its first system still in qualification at a major memory maker. So this is that speculative, higher-risk patient pick that's on the pile. It's the one you decide to hold because of where memory packaging is going, not necessarily what it's making today. That happens to be the foundation bonding side. The other half is the raw materials that every fab is going to be burning through, and that is Entegris, ticker symbol ENTG, which supplies the ultra-pure chemicals, filters, and polishing materials. And once you're qualified for a production line on dozens of materials all at once, changing you out is so slow and risky. The customers stay in for years. That's the number that changes the whole company. The most advanced AI and HBM chips are only about 5% of all wafers made globally, but they already account for almost 30% of Entegris revenue because each one uses far more material than a regular chip. And that intensity roughly doubles with each new node. I'm just going to read that one again. So 5% of the wafers, 30% of the revenue. Add it all up. Revenue up 39% over 4 years with operating margin back to 29%. That alone is a win for Entegris on complexity. And complexity is the one thing memory is guaranteed to introduce. So now that we have that full stack complete, let's go ahead and recap how I would invest into these. If I had $100 to put across these 10 names, I am not be spreading it evenly. I am leaning towards the parts of the stack that have the most durable growth, the layers that just keep on winning even if data center spending begins to slow, because every advanced chip on the planet needs to go through them. So the two biggest slices are the big equipment and inspection layers, the tool makers and defect hunters without whom nothing gets built. $25 goes to the tools, like Applied Materials and Lam Research. Another $25 goes to the KLA and Onto Innovation inspectors. Then I'd play $22 in the Advantest and Teradyne testers. Then I would put $20 into the foundation, the bonders, and the materials with Entegris, BESIY, and Kulicke Soffa. And the smallest piece of $8, I would put that into Rambus. That's the whole framework now, rung by rung. But maybe you would rather not be dealing with 10 different tickers. Before we wrap up, let's discuss the two ETFs that people always ask about and clarify what they do and don't cover. There's the Round Memory ETF, DRAM, and a new fund called HBMX. Most people will ask which one to pick, and that is the wrong question in my mind because these two actually cover completely different parts of the same machine. DRAM only has the names of the makers like Micron, SK Hynix, and Samsung, with not a single supplier among them. But HBMX does a bit of both, owning the makers and then also going down into the supplier stack, the equipment, the packaging, and the materials. So here the real choice is, well, it is kind of simple. You get the maker's DRAM, HBMX. Well, it buys you the mix of the whole stack, but the pure picks and shovels layer, the 10 names that we just walked, that's the one that nobody packages totally for you. That one you still have to build yourself. And there you have it. That's the memory stack from top to bottom. And as always, I hope you will subscribe to this channel, and thanks so much for watching.